Hello, you wonderfully weird human. If you've made it to this video, you're likely not your typical human. If you're interested in the deepest questions of who you are and what this is, this video's for you. This video is sort of what I imagine I would have loved to hear a decade ago while I was in search mode, when I was in like extreme search mode of trying to find home, trying to find belonging, trying to find peace, trying to find what's true, what's real. How much of this is just what I've been conditioned to believe versus what's actual. So what I want to talk today is a metaphor that I think may have been helpful for me back then. For how things are. And it has to be a metaphor because how things are is too big to say it directly. There's this beautiful quote from the Tao Te Ching that says, "The Tao, which is how things are, the Tao that can be said is not the true Tao." That's how the whole book of the Tao Te Ching starts off. Basically ending it before it even really begins, because it's acknowledging that to try to talk about how things are is absurd, because to talk about it is part of how things are. It's within it. And when we try to define something, when we try to understand something, we're by nature sort of trying to draw a line around it in our minds and go, here's what things are, and here's how it works, looking in on it from some sort of like higher vantage point or more zoomed out vantage point. But of course you can't zoom out farther than how things are, because your vantage point is within how things are. That said, you can use metaphors to kind of point at the nature of things, to help clear some of the cobwebs in our minds that are attachments to ideas of how things are. So we can sort of use ideas to unencumber other ideas, to pry loose the chains of our older belief systems and older constructs that might not be serving freedom and truth anymore, but might just be acting as shackles. So here's the metaphor. I'll just show you. I'm in this beautiful place in Nevada City right now, up in California. See those trees? There's something about the trees that I feel like speak ancient wisdom from, and this is really, I think, anything that you really see in the universe can sort of speak that same wisdom. But the trees, for some reason, for me, have been a beautiful source of wisdom spoken in a way that you can't really hear with your mind, but if you pay attention and you slow down enough, you can hear it with your body, with your heart. So one of the things that I've learned from the trees, that I've heard from the trees, is how there's this process to a tree that starts in the ground. It starts as a seed. And a seed in itself doesn't seem like much, but when it goes into the ground and dies as a seed and spreads itself and it gives itself to the earth. And of course we're using metaphor here, but that's we're in metaphor land. And it gives itself to the earth and it spreads and it creates roots, and then eventually it peeks out of the earth. And the little seedling eventually becomes a stalk and a branch and then a trunk. And the trunk keeps going and gives rise to branches, and the branches give rise to leaves, and sometimes the leaves give rise to fruit or other seeds. And all of these trees are there's like an individuality to them, but there's also an interconnectedness to them where they share nutrients in the soil and they're grounded in the same earth and taking in the same sunlight, and they communicate and they act. There's a sort of will, like if a tree will bend towards the water or towards the sunlight, wanting to be alive, but it all moves a lot slower than human beings tend to move. But there's a similarity to how that process works. And I think it's in trees, and I think it's in galaxies, and I think it's in human beings and in the mind. There's a way that it is, that when we look at the slower motion tree might reveal something of ourselves. So when we look at whatever we're seeing in our lives in this moment, when you're watching this video, when you feel that itch on your shoulder, when you think, what is this guy talking about? Where is this going? When you feel bored or sad, whatever's happening in this moment, if you could just kind of like take stock of you, even right now, what's going on in this very moment. And there are only a few ingredients, actually 4, that you could find that make up this moment. One is sensations. The sensations in your body. You can notice right now, maybe your breath and what it feels like as it comes into your nostrils and goes into your lungs. You might be able to slow down enough to feel your pulse. You might be able to find areas of your body that feel looser or tighter or numb or painful or pleasurable. You might find a hum of life if you really pay attention to the inner sensations of your body, that it's just sort of all over your body. So there's sensations. That's ingredient number 1. Ingredient number 2 would be feelings. Emotions. You might notice, how are you feeling right now as far as emotions go? Happy, sad, horny, jealous, angsty, whatever you're anxious, peaceful. And you might feel multiple at once. But maybe just even check in now and see if you can notice any emotional qualities, any ingredients of this moment. So what we're noticing is just, again, is how this moment shows up. Almost like if you tasted a meal and you're like, okay, what are the ingredients of this? This is a whole prepared dish. I'm tasting some salt. I'm tasting some whatever. I'm not a chef, so I was gonna go into like what a dish might have in it, but it has some macaroni. It has some cheese. I'm not quite that bad, but so what are the ingredients of this moment? We've got sensations. We've got emotions. We've got thoughts. So there's this whole inner world of the mind that often exists of thoughts, which can appear as pictures, it can appear as words, maybe some combination. But just notice if there are any thoughts here now. And these are another ingredient. And we can just notice that there's like it's all in the same awareness, it's in the same moment. But they're, again, just different sort of ingredients, like the same dish, different ingredients in the dish. And the 4th one would be perceptions. So like your sensory data, especially outside, you're experiencing sight right now. You're experiencing what the colors of this screen are, the colors of your peripheral vision in the room, experiencing sound, what the world sounds like right now, what it smells like, what it feels like as you touch it, what you on the outside senses of your skin, and how your weight on the chair, the temperature of the air, the taste in your mouth. So the sensory data that are perceptive of the world around your body would be another ingredient of how things are. And so these four, which by the way, I want to give some props to Rupert Spira for putting those into those neat four categories that I heard, that I loved dividing those up, and it holds true to how I see the world. It's like, oh, I can't find a fifth. If you can find a fifth, let me know in the comments. A fifth fundamental ingredient other than those four of sensations, emotions, thoughts, and perceptions. But whatever we're experiencing now, those are the primary four ingredients that make it up. In the metaphor of the tree, those are the outermost fruit on the branches. Whatever's coming up in this moment, that's the very farthest reaches of the tree. And so what a lot of us do, we're just interacting with that. When we interact with the tree, you can't really interact with the roots of the tree other than going through these more outer layers. And the outer layers of this moment are our experience of this moment. Sort of the outer shell is, what is my experience? These four ingredients. And a lot of us don't like the fruit that we're seeing. This is probably 99% or more of people. That if you're really honest with, there's like an unsettledness about your lived experience most of the time. That it's like, you get temporary like, wow, finally I ate. And then it's like, okay, now what? Well, now I'm a little hungry again for dessert. Or now I'm getting tired. I want to go hang out with some friends. There's always this kind of like, what's next? Unsettledness, not at homeness. We're filling it all the time with screens and food and sex and drugs and friends and relationships, whatever. Trying to fill that void, right? The void is an unsettledness with how things are. So that's the outer fruit, and a lot of us are unsettled with how things are. And there's varying degrees of that, of course. Varying degrees of this suffering, whether it's from a mild kind of blasé numbness to absolute torture, being in the depths of hell. But what the mind tends to do is notice that it doesn't like those fruits at the end of the tree. And in fact, the mind sort of is the resistance to the fruits at the end of the tree. That's what the nature of mind, as we might talk about it in spiritual terms, is. That's what the mind is the resistance to how things are. And if that doesn't make sense, just hold on, I'll get deeper into that. But for now, let's just notice that there tends to be a resistance a lot of times to this external fruit. And what the mind does is try to solve it by just changing the fruit. Just directly, by just being like, okay, the fruit of this moment is sadness. I don't want to feel sad. I want to feel happy. So I got to change that. What do I do? How can I change the world, the external world, the circumstances? How can I change the fruit directly so that it's not sadness, it's happiness? And what that tends to do is just build another layer on top of that fruit. The branch just extends a little bit more, and we push down the sadness, we push down whatever is in the moment. And now we're dealing with a layer of like on top of that maybe now it's just anxiety. Maybe it's not deep grief and sadness anymore. It's just, now it's just I feel a little anxiety, but at least I'm distracted and I'm just scrolling through reels. But the truth of how this fruit works, the truth of the tree, is that it's not, the fruit doesn't change by external manipulation. You can't squish an apple into an orange. The apple is there because it's an apple tree. And because the water and the sunlight entered through the branches and the leaves into that trunk and into the soil and into the roots, and all that flow of what the tree is all goes together all the way back to when it was a seed. It all is, the fruit is just the most recent expression of this tree because of what the tree is. And if you want different fruit, you have to have a different kind of tree. The different kind of tree happens in the seed. It happens in the roots, and it happens in the trunk. It's not from a place of external force, but internal growth and being. So if we explore this metaphor deeper, we go, so what? We don't have access into those deeper parts of the tree and to see what the being of the tree, what the roots of the tree are. We don't have access to that except through the surface, except through the most outermost expressions of it. So in the same way, if we want to look at ourselves and go, I want a different kind of experience of life than the one I have. All we can enter that through, that curiosity, that exploration, is the current moment and how it's presenting itself. So at first we might practice some mindfulness and go, oh, let's look at what's happening. Let's look at, what am I sensing right now? What am I thinking right now? What am I breathing right now? What does that feel like? What is that experience like? And then when we get the hang of that and we start getting a little distance from just being identified with the most outer shell of our experience, and we go, there's also awareness. I'm not just this breath. There's also this awareness of the breath. And so it provides this little extra spaciousness. In the tree metaphor, we're going deeper into the tree now than just looking at the fruit. We're starting to get into the structure of the tree itself. As we begin to look into that, there's a few other ingredients of how this tree gives rise to this fruit. And so to talk about this and what I think these ingredients are, I want to pay homage again to the Sedona Method, which is a method that I've found very helpful, both for myself and in helping other people navigate some of the issues in their lives as well. So in the Sedona Method, which is sort of a method of releasing attachments and clinging to life, it identifies three sort of primary ingredients of how we identify with these external fruits of the tree. And that is the desire for control, the desire for approval, and the desire for safety. Those three desires are sort of the branches or the trunk of this tree, of this sense of me, of who I am. So you can't feel like a me. You can't feel that mind that is the resistance to the fruit depends on these ingredients. It could be one, it could be all of them. And you can find this for yourself if you dig deep enough. And the Sedona Method is a beautiful technology to explore learning those ingredients. So for instance, you could do a little bit now with me if you'd like. If you find any anxiety, any tension in you right now, it could be physical, it could be any of those four ingredients. It could be a thought, a belief, it could be an emotion, a sensation, a perception. that feels like maybe there's a little problem with it. And then ask that tension, if you will. Notice that you're not just that tension, so you can actually sort of interact with it because you're aware of it. So you can't be it entirely, right? There's also at least the awareness of it, if you're aware of it. So from that place of awareness, maybe you just interact with that tension and ask, is there any desire for control or for approval or safety here? And just see what comes up. You don't have to judge it. I would encourage you not to judge it, actually, if possible. Just hold space for it. Or just notice with curiosity and openness. Oh, yeah, okay, I can see there's a little bit of fear there, and that could look like a desire to be safe, or just the desire for some love, the desire for approval, or the desire to be in control, to have certain things feel a certain way or go a certain way. And then sometimes even in just beginning to notice it, you might notice it starting to soften or change. The Sedona Method invites you different ways of letting some of those burdens of holding on to those control, or the desire for control, or desire for approval, or desire for safety can begin to release and be surrendered into what the fullness of this moment is. But just for now, just that kind of little cursory, hi, just saying hi to it can be a great start. And sometimes when you begin to notice it and you invite awareness into it like that, just the awareness of it begins to open up a little bit more space. And as you start doing work with that and really looking at the ingredients that are giving rise to your experience, what you'll find deeper in the tree, as we continue the metaphor of the tree into the roots, is a desire for separateness. All these three ingredients, desire for control, approval, and safety, those are expressions of a deeper desire for separateness. What do I mean by separateness? This is what the ego is. This is the sense of me, the sense of who am I, and how does the earth, the undifferentiated soil of the earth, turn into just this one tree. And for that to happen, there has to be sort of a death to that uniformity into a very specific birth, into time and space. That's what the seed does. It gives specificity to the earth. Now, it's not just undifferentiated soil. It's, I'm going to be this thing, this tree. And even though it's not actually fundamentally different or other than the earth, some distinctions can be born. And so this desire, if you will, to be its own thing. So it's not bad. The ego's not bad. The desire to be separate is not bad. But if you fully believe yourself to actually be separate, it creates the experience of alienation and loneliness and separateness that is essentially hell, where you actually feel divorced and separated from your source, from your ground. When it actually gets believed in the furthest reaches, that is where hell is. So when you go back into the roots, the move back into the roots, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within. When we move back within, that is the source of our life. That is the divine, that is heaven, inside, moving inward. We move back into the soil. And we can find this beautiful balance of still being a tree, but not just being the tree. So we have these bodies and minds. But as we move and we look at the ingredients of how the undifferentiated ground of being moves from that into this desire to be something specific, through these desires for control and approval and safety into thoughts and sensations and emotions and perceptions. We see the map of that. We see the Tao of that. How the Tao becomes the individual waves in the ocean. Well, now we're not just the fruit or the desires that give rise to that fruit. We're also the awareness, the land, the ground, the earth itself, gravity itself, light itself, space itself. The whole thing works together for the tree to be. So the tree is not just the tree. The tree is the sunlight. And the tree is you and I exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide with it. It is the dance of all the galaxies together that is also the tree. And this, don't get lost in the woo-woo-ness if that sounds woo-woo to you or too spiritual or anything. This is just really quite plain in how it is. This is just how reality works. So if we just notice this moment and the ingredients of this moment, and we follow it deeper and deeper through the desires of, wow, I thought that I just wanted some ice cream. That's the outside. But I notice, there's actually a desire to control how I'm feeling right now. And that might be related to, I don't feel like I'm lovable if I'm sad. So I need to control how I'm feeling. And there's these vines and branches that are all wound together. And I don't feel safe if I'm not loved. Being loved helps me feel safe. So I'm going to try to control my experience of right now by eating some ice cream so that I feel a little better about it. But that's all so that I can feel like a me. I there starts becoming the bigger I. That's not just the fruit. It's not just this body or mind. It's I, life itself. I, being itself. I amness itself. And when you start seeing that, I, whatever I am, the infinite mystery, the Tao, the flow of life, create an experience of separateness through these desires, and it's all giving rise as that thought. That's just an expression of wanting to be separate from myself. When you see that, and not with judgment, not with trying to change it, but you just see it with awareness, the whole dance can move from hell to heaven. It can actually all become quite beautiful. Or even the desire to be separate can be seen as part of the dance of oneness, the dance of love, of the earth just expressing itself as trees and people and minds, egos. So the invitation of this metaphor is not to have a new belief system about how reality is. It's not to actually believe that life is a tree or that your mind is the fruit or any of that stuff. You hold it lightly. But the invitation of the metaphor is to see how it is right now and then see if you can move deeper into it, into where it's actually now and here. So that the thought of tomorrow or yesterday doesn't get believed in a way that pulls us away from the rest of our experience, but that it can be seen as, that's a thought of tomorrow or yesterday. That's not real. The tomorrow or yesterday in that thought is not something other than a thought. It's just a thought. And the thought is just an expression of a desire to control how things are. And that desire to control things is just an expression of wanting to be separate. And that wanting to be separate is just an expression of God loving herself. Because how can God love herself if she doesn't get to stand apart from herself in some experiential way? There can't be any movement. And when they see that, then that end result, the fruit, there's no reason to resist it. And when it's not resisted, suddenly, magically, the fruit is actually the sweetest thing you've ever tasted or could ever taste. Your experience of even the fruit that you thought was unacceptable, sadness, depression, pain, suddenly is this exquisite expression of life. So that's the invitation of the metaphor. It's into life. It's into who you are. To click back, if you can, to zoom out of being identified just as this body, this mind, that feeling, that emotion. I am angry. No, there's might be anger here, but that's one thing of a trillion things that are here, if you pay more attention. So let your attention draw you into being. From the outside of the tree, from here down into here, and into being, into your very being, into your very nature. And just notice that it's already perfect.